Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So hello and welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Dona Airey, and she is a coach of emotional paradigm. She has an MA in psychology in early childhood education, and she taught early childhood programs, started a Montessori school. Oh, that's fascinating. She says, I followed my path to becoming a psychotherapist by getting my master's in social work and clinical social work itself. And she did that for 32 years, is now retired from that. Also is certified as a CranioSacral Therapist, Shin Acupressure, and she practices body therapy for 15 years in conjunction with clinical social work private practice. So welcome, and I'm really looking forward to our talk today.
Oh, I am too. I'm looking forward to talking to you because I'm so interested in what you do, and you know how the two of us in some ways think alike in that all the answers are in the body and learning how to listen to the body. And of course, my focus is on the emotions. In fact, I officially have a name now. My business name is Transforming Within. And then with the little byline of move towards unique metamorphosis. And so, so many people don't know. I started this about 10 years ago. And I found that with all the people that came into my office, I would say seriously, 90 or 95% did not know what to do with their emotions or how to utilize them or what they were or were afraid of them and all those things. And so I began forming a way of teaching people about emotions so that they could begin not only feeling comfortable about them, but utilizing them through the body. And of course, the opening is emotions are pre-verbal. When we're born, we can be angry, we can be sad, we can be afraid, we can be joyful. And so I really make a distinction between emotions and feelings.
Oh, good. Because actually, it's funny. I was just giving a lecture this morning, and that's what I was saying. There is a difference, and in our country or society, we confuse it. Oh, feelings. What are your emotions? No.
Right.
Feelings to me are an interpretation of emotions. Is that how are you doing that? Yeah,
that would be a way of saying it. What I say, I describe it as the feelings are emotions and behavior and learned beliefs,
right.
and you know all the other things that kind of we think of as emotions, but the emotions are physical. Feelings are everything, including the physical.
Right. Yeah, that's why I feel like it goes through an interpretation. There's a slight distancing from what you're saying, emotions being pre-verbal. There is no interpreter at that point, which is part of why so much trauma happens when you're younger. You can't make sense of it, right? So they just are there, you know. But let's before we dive into that, I would love to know what brought you personally on this path. How did you get interested in this, and did you always know that you'd be doing this kind of work?
In some ways, I grew up with a father who was a Presbyterian minister. However, he did iridology and hypnosis and touch for health, and cleaned all his vegetables. One of the funny things is he made us make our eggnog with the shells because he said that's where all the nutrients were. So I kind of grew up with, you know, health and odd things. And in fact, it was funny when I decided to go. I think in high school I said, you know, a lot of people have something to hang on to when they're they have a church, or they have a program, or they have a belief with other people. But how many people are out there alone, without a support? And
Mhm.
so that's really how I decided to become a therapist, is I wanted to help people that didn't have other ways of helping themselves. And so, I grew up sometimes embarrassed by, my dad's woo-woo stuff. And so I was going to be a very, straight therapist, and, be very clear and distinct. Well, that lasted a couple years maybe before I started my Jinshindo training in body work, and then craniosacral. It's like I am who I am. So, in fact, in my first office, I had it in divided. I had a massage table on another side of the screen, and then my therapy practice. So not only I didn't stay very long with, you know, not including the whole body for health.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I got started into therapy, and then with body work because I'm so interested in it. And so, all of most of my 32 years I was doing, with the understanding and training and education with both body work and with, psychotherapy and mental and emotional healing.
Mhm. And so, what for you was inadequate about what you describe as conventional therapy? What was missing for you that led you elsewhere?
Well, there are a few things. One is terminology. I mean, in the mental health fields, um, they everything um, has a label. Everything has a description. Everything has, it's very, diagnosis that, are very limiting. And I found that, what about what it does to the body? And what about how the body affects our emotions and our thoughts? And what about, and about, when you have a thought and all of a sudden you have a stomach ache, what do people think? They don't even address that in conventional mental health, and so it's just very limiting for me, in that I couldn't talk about the body. In fact, in the 80s, it was odd to even include hypnosis, which is kind of my first step into holistic health, and even that was like, whoa. Of course, it isn't that way anymore, but I just felt so limited in not being able to talk about the body, and not being able to talk about the relationship of how we think to how we treat ourselves physically and emotionally, how we treat other people. So it was just very limiting to me.
Mm-hmm. So, when you say the body in that context, uh, what can you like expand on that just so it's really clear what you mean? Because on some level, in conventional medicine, they talk about the body, right? But what do you mean? Because I think we're probably on the same page there. But what are you saying that is missing um, in it? Like, is it that, or no? You tell me what you feel is. I still want more clarification on, because it's a great point. What's missing?
Well, there's a chemical, even chemically
Mhm.
in the brain is where our emotions are, and people don't realize that. And the brain has a direct connection with all the physical parts of the body, the muscles, the organs, and everything. It's I think one of the real simplistic ways of talking about it, I think, is when we get into a fear state. In
Mhm.
fact, I talk about this as an example. Um, you're out in the wild, and a little animal is being chased by a big animal predator. And so they run, run, run,
Mhm.
and then the little animal plays dead. And the predator comes over and smells it and thinks it's dead and goes off. I always was curious about that. How could that happen? Why wouldn't he know he was alive? Well, the cortisol levels from the adrenals shoot out into the body. And I'm sure with the animal, it has a certain smell. And so then when the animal is safe, it gets up and it jumps around and like, exactly. It's like, get rid of this cortisol. We don't do that. We, and people don't realize, well, yeah, you have to move the physical body because all these chemicals have now been released from our emotions. But what do? We get quiet. We don't address the chemical things that are going in our bodies, how the different organs are affected by how we think, and the meridians. I mean, there's so many direct correlations between the meridians and the organs and how we think, and all the chemical things of the body, aren't addressed. How we move isn't addressed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was just, looking at the vagus nerve, right? It's like 80% of it is afferent, right? From our organ, right. Sensing our organs and giving information to our brain,
right,
to respond, right? So we don't realize how our actual internal body, all our organs, have a voice, right? We keep thinking, oh, it's just up here,
right?
It's
as
not.
though they're separate, like, oh, I have a brain and I have a body, like
exactly.
They're not connected.
And neurotransmitters are made in the gut, right? So our 70% of them anyway. So if our gut is in dysbiosis, it can't create the neurotransmitters that we need in a healthy way, right? So it's definitely a cycle where the body is intimately involved in all of our states.
Yes.
Of not just fear, not just anxiety, but wellness, all our happy hormones, everything. Yeah.
And lately anyway, you hear about the gut being the second brain. Sometimes I think it's the first brain because we don't even realize all that's going on in our small and large intestines that affect us emotionally, and how our emotions affect our colon and our intestines, and they literally go out into the body. They're not just a tube that carries things through. It's a living being, it's a living organ, both of those, and things do go in and out of it, and even that people don't even realize how we affect it and how it affects us.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of work out there on this, but I agree, it is the first brain, because till the age of 7, that's where all our reactions are really gut reactions. It's our gut that's literally responding. And then we start using that prefrontal cortex and making sense of this and putting a context, and and that's why so much happens earlier, and yet we have a memories of sorts, but they're largely emotional memories in that sense, right? So actually, can you expand on all that? That's your field. I'm just fascinated by the subject. So why don't you tell us?
I was excited to hear your part in that, because I think that you have the verbiage and the understanding more of the neurotransmitters and that sort of thing. I can talk about it more on a behavioral and an emotional aspect. But one reason I was so excited to be talking to you is because of your knowledge about the brain and the things that you talk about that my verbiage is missing,
Okay, sure. I mean, it's a conversation. That's the whole point of this. So
right.
It'll go all ways. And I've got to say that the verbiage can help, but I have noticed that myself being in practice, what you see and what's happening clinically is, to me, the biggest teacher. It's almost as if you get to learn the verbiage afterwards to explain the phenomena that experience is showing us. And so when I was very busy in my practice, I didn't have time to really get all of this stuff. And by the time I had graduated and I'm in practice, most of all these theories we were told in medical school have evolved and
Mhm.
have changed, and things that I was told that don't that are not possible became more possible. And so there's been a real opening, not that in standard allopathic medicine there are necessarily solutions, but you couldn't say that nerves don't regenerate, or statements that when I was taking, pathology, physiology, and all those things, they were like absolutes. No, that's what happens. And
Mhm.
even when you look at the evolution of the fascia, which was the saran wrap, bubble wrap that when you had an operation, you just took it out and discarded it without understanding how complex it is, and how it's really our living matrix that puts everything together, that signals, biological, physiological signals, as well as chemical signals for all our neurons and neurotransmitters to work. And it has pre-nerve endings, which impact us and how we hold trauma in ourselves, in our body, in our actual body, not just as a thought. So,
Right, right.
yeah, no, so I've learned more from experience, and then later found, oh, that explains it. Now I get it. So I think we're constantly in that process, But
Yeah.
let's talk, and I'm happy to share whatever comes up, but I want to learn from you also. What is your understanding of emotions? How does that work? What are they? Like, let's explore that.
Yes. Um, One thing I want to mention before I delve into that is there's a process called brain spotting. And I think that's a good explanation, sort of what happens also in that, in the limbic system is where we house our memories and uh, trauma. And so if something happens as a child, let's say, and or at any age, and we don't deal with it. It's like encapsulated in that limbic system, not moving, not doing anything. And the process of brain spotting is to get the eyes to wherever we look in our eyes reaches a different spot in the limbic system. And so what we do is we find a spot to look at dealing with a certain issue or trauma or something. And so while you're looking at that system, you're also talking about it. And then, of course, where is it in your body? And so then they do a body scan. And with that, the body scan, whatever might come up, it might be the stomach, it might be tension, it might be a pain, whatever comes up, you just work with that area. Forget about what it's about, you know, in terms of talking about it. You go right into the physical and you work with that physical sensation or movement or whatever it is. And that's so fascinating because that's where the healing is, not in talking about it, although there's a piece for that too, obviously. But the physical part of emotions are where the healing is in terms of how we hold on to things. So when I talk about emotions being physical, um, it's a hard jump for people to go, well, I'm worried about this and I'm worried about that. And it's okay, do the body. And I do this even without brain spotting because I did this even before I knew about that system. But it's like to be able to go into the body and work on it in a physical way, so you're not caught up in what the story is or what the happened, because like you said, we hold our emotions, we hold our trauma, we hold things that have happened in our bodies, and when we don't do anything with it, they don't have room to move, they don't have room to heal. And so to find different ways to work with the body, even by yourself, which is what I like to teach,
Mhm.
is, you know, if you, you know, somebody might say, well, I'm trying to think of an example. I, I get, take something simple. I get scared when I'm going to fly. And
Mhm.
so, you know, we do some of the eye things and we talk a little bit and then we go into the body, and where that fear is held is where we work. And by working, I mean, it's fascinating to me, by just working on the physical things, the
So
emotional fear
let's go
gets
through
released.
this. Yeah, let's do it just to give a sense. So because fear of flying is a thought, right? Uh,
Yeah,
it's a decision to basically decide I am afraid of flying. It can come from an experience or not,
right,
right?
right.
So that's the first thing. So we have a thought. Then what is the process exactly to connect that thought to an emotion? How do you how do
Well,
you
it's the
get
opposite. In fact, what in my work, I separate them.
that? Okay.
Now, let's talk about, you know, let's start out on what you want. Let's talk about the fear of flying and what how that is for you, because people then get connected. And as they talk about it, something's going on in the body.
Okay.
So then at a point I say, okay, let's do a body scan and find out what's going on inside. Um, and so like I said, it might be, you know, my heart is pounding really hard. Okay. So we let go of the thought.
Right.
We don't
Okay.
go to the thought again. We
Yeah.
stay with that physical part,
Yes.
because as you said, it can happen either way. You can have an experience, then that experience is caught in the body. And so we have thoughts about it. Or we can just say, you know, I saw something on the news and a plane blew up, so now I'm afraid to fly. So there, it started with a thought. But once again, whether it starts in the body as an experience or starts as a thought, it's the same thing. It's still in the body, and
Mhm.
it's within the body that it gets healed. And so both are important because people understand thoughts. They know how to think about things. And that learning curve of going into the body and working with it, you know, I've had people in my therapy, and as I've worked with this, take a month to kind of get it, because you can't, it's not a checklist. You know, you can't say you do this, this, and this like a thought. It's an experience. So you have to facilitate this experience
Right.
of physicalness. And then one day, oh, I get it. But you just have, you know, people will say it's not working or it's getting worse. And trust me, just keep going, keep going, keep going.
Mhm.
But that physical sensation of movement happens. And
Yeah.
then their thoughts start changing. Oh, well, I'm not afraid of that anymore.
Right.
And so that relationship, no matter where it comes from, the healing itself begins with the physical emotion of it.
Mhm, mhm.
Is that, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. No. 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 And it is very similar to what I do with people through the body work, reboot, and Bowen therapy in general, because I do place the context of healing. So I always like, it's not a vacuum. We
Right.
talk about what's going on, which brings you to a level of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
No judgment. Like,
Right.
doesn't matter. It's all good. And then they have true physical, shoulder that's not working, whatever. There's always some other physical things, not always,
Right.
but often. But the moment the body releases an emotion,
Mm-hmm.
that's where that's where the work happens. And like they may know it's there, or it may be um, unconscious and associate it to another physical symptom.
Sure. Yes.
But you cannot release the physical symptom without releasing the associated emotion. It's just all in one.
Yeah.
It comes together.
Right.
Right. Which is I mean, for me, the beauty of doing body work, it's less complicated. You don't have to,
Right.
you just touch the body, and by touching it, you're giving and again, it's the therapeutic relationship is important as well. People need to feel that they're safe.
Yeah.
Because hi, it's Dr. Manon, and I just want to take a moment, commercial break, to ask you to subscribe to my podcast and kindly leave a comment if you're enjoying this. And also, just to let you know, I have tips for people in health looking for solutions to just a variety of issues. It's more like an attitude of health, and they're entertaining short videos, and you can find those under drmanonbolliger.com/tip. The link is here, and I look forward to hearing from you. Because often with traumatic experience, they're in protection mode, which is normal. That's what the body does to survive, right? So it's a survival mode reaction. But what happens though is that you have to, because the work I do is physical touch. It's not like hands-on, like massage or anything like that. It's very light, with spaces in between, so that the person can, or the body can, integrate the information. But it is that space in between and the trust that's happening by the changing the environment of the fascia that also affects the interpretation of the emotion. So I always tell people, well, let an emotion, it's like it only takes 90 seconds. That's what I found. I've tried to measure it. If you don't judge it, take your mind right out of the picture.
Right.
Don't start explaining what's going on. Just stay with what's going on.
Right.
It clears in about 90 seconds and it's done. Right? It's got, like, all the tentacles are gone. So that's what my experience of emotion is, and that's pretty well, the sophisticated way I explain it to people.
Yeah.
Go on.
Like I said, I did CranioSacral, and I did Shin Acupressure, and some other body things. And what you're describing as in, certain touches, release and integrate at the same time. It's like releases and then integrates with the wholeness of whatever that is going on and into the body. And so the difference in what I'm doing now is I don't do any hands-on, which is why I can do online so easily, because it's really, one, a teaching of what are emotions and how we experience them. And then I can teach people how to work with their physical emotions within themselves as they occur. And so that's sort of what my process is at this point. Like I said, which is why I felt like I could go online pretty easily, whereas I've been in an office for 32 years.
Right.
And, part of that's a personal thing. I'd like to travel a little bit. I'd like to go to the beach. I'd like to, free up some of my time. And actually, as you know, that'll make me a better therapist anyway, or coach.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so many therapists have this idea that in principle, they're all for balance. In reality, they come so much from service that they forget that they self-care. They forget themselves in it, so good for you.
And it has certainly happened to me more than once in 32 years. Yep. Oh yeah, me. Having to take a vacation, or, and this is a lifestyle change for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about it, and it's made me more excited than my work, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the more you give love to yourself, the more there is, right? It's
that's right.
There's no scarcity of that. So I want to get a little clarity on your method. So, because you use the word, well, no, actually, you were doing different work before. I'm not familiar with, did you call it spotting or
Brain spotting.
brain spotting? What does that mean though? Like, what does it, what, tell me, like, what are you doing? What, how do you spot things in your brain?
Yeah. One, it might make a little bit more sense. This came out of EMDR, which they use the eyes going back and forth. And in this method, you're looking at one spot or maybe two. And so the focus, as that I learned many years ago in NLP, is that, as you look into a spot, different emotions will come up. And so, in that way, you can work with emotions. And here's a simple one. Like, you can say just something little, you have to say it out loud, but say something that maybe bothers you or you don't like or something. And so as you think of it, take, 10 seconds, look down and think about that right now. Just 10 seconds.
Okay. Yep.
Look down.
Okay.
Okay, let that go. Now have that same, look up about 45 degrees up and have the same thought. Okay, so was it different?
Yeah.
How was the experience of it different?
Well, what happened for me is the first time I felt like more concentrated into it, more absorbed by it. And then when I was looking up, it's almost like I had to search for it.
Yeah. It changes. Because when you're looking down, again, talking about even with brain spotting, you change your eye position because it goes to a different place in the limbic system. And so, again, that's a little simplistic, but I hope it helps understand, because we use a pointer, and with the pointer, they have something to look at.
Right.
And so we can change the pointer in terms of where their eyes are. And so maybe they're looking at the pointer, and we have like from 0 to 10, the intensity of something that they're working on. And let's say the intensity is 10 as they look at this spot, and it's too overwhelming for them. So we find a different spot that, like you said, that was kind of, it went away completely. But we go to a different spot that's the same subject, the same emotion, the same, but it's a little less. You're able to deal with it because it's not so overwhelming that you get stuck. And so we can use the eye placement in terms of allowing people to work on the level that they can still work without it being overwhelmed. That's an example of a part of what happens during that process.
And how, because I mean, that's the principle of EMDR that is used a lot for PTSD, but is it the fact that by finding a different location, you start to realize that an emotion can't have full, like can't grab you fully? Or is it that you're changing the intensity so that if it was a 10 and now it, like I couldn't think of something with something that was like a 4, so it was a 0. Okay. But if I could think of something that was a 10, it may have gone down to 5 or 6. But is the idea of going to a spot that is less intense, then to stay with it for a while to allow the emotion to come out?
Yes, and then we go back to the original one. And then to integrate, that emotion or thought or wherever you are in the less intense place, to allow the intense place to meld together so that what you're working towards is 0. And so I don't have any emotional response or intensity to it. And it might take one session, it might take more than one. But yeah, so you still work with both spots
Mm-hmm.
because it is the less intensity, not an understanding. In fact, you do get to an understanding, but after the emotional aspect kind of dissipates.
Clears, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do understand what you mean by it being a different, it's a different experience. It's an experience. That's what
Right.
it is.
Right.
It's not just, I mean, thoughts will always to analyze after,
Yes.
but you can't, yeah, it's not a thought experience. It's an experience. It's an experience with your body. Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
You know, one thing that it brings to mind what you just said, I also talk about the way we function in the world is body, mind, and spirit. And if you look at that as a pie, third, they each have their own process.
Mm-hmm.
The mind is linear, the body is movement, spirit is kind of around, right? And so, with each element fully developed, they talk to each other and integrate. So if you're fully developed in functioning in the emotional part of you and the physical part of you, then the dialogue with the thought is more complete and with the spirit. And so then you have a more complete, like your core, so to speak, because you have all three elements working together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's almost like more embodied experience.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Starting with the body, but
Right. That's
the
right.
embodied is beyond the body. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and you can tell if a person is embodied or not,
Mm-hmm.
and it has, yeah, not just to do with their movement; it's everything else
Yes.
together, included. So,
And so when you were talking about earlier, I forget your question, but it's like, yes, you do integrate the thought and the emotion. However, just like you learn anything, you separate it first
mm-hmm.
so that you can learn it. So as I work with people and their emotions, it's kind of like, forget the thought right now. We're working with the physical part. And once that becomes natural to them, and then, like I said earlier, they can integrate much better. You think better when your emotions are uh, functional.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But there is kind of in the learning curve, I try to separate it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. It's true. It's easier to understand if you separate it first. Otherwise, you're doing all pieces at once and you're
Right.
not really surrendering to
Right.
one thing.
And as a healing person, like with your work and when I work with people in person, you can integrate it kind of all at once because you're there holding certain things, whether that's holding the emotional part or holding the physical part or holding something so that it can integrate. But as I'm working with people and getting them to understand their emotions and be comfortable with them, it has to be a separation so they can learn it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I had a question. What was it again? Oh, yes. So before you were doing, or I think you said you were doing like work on the unconscious, right? Or the subconscious.
Yeah.
How does that figure in now in your understanding with what you've come to learn? How does that fit to emotional work? Like, how do you?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I've never thought of it in that way. I think that with the unconscious or the subconscious, it isn't, I think, and I'm doing this off the cuff because I've not thought about it. So I'm just going to say what I'm thinking at the moment. It might be different tomorrow. But today, right now, as I see it, it's like the subconscious doesn't have the verbiage. You think, in dreams, and as the subconscious, it's more visions and colors, and you that's where the knowledge is. So it's not really emotions, it's not thought, and yet it's kind of an in-between thing, but I think it's closer to the body because it's nonverbal.
Because it's nonverbal. I mean, there's plenty of emotions. Like if you look at dreams, for example, it could be emotions too.
And think about dreaming as an example. When someone tells you about their dream, or we think about our own dreams, whatever, what comes out the most? This person did this. It's not about what was said necessarily, unless it is connected to a movement or something that happened or the scenery of it. You know, think about how people talk about dreams and nightmares, particularly.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't have an answer to my question either.
Me either.
But it's an interesting thing to look.
It is.
I mean, I know in my work that how I see the subconscious, not so much with dreams, because I haven't even looked at that really. I mean, not from this angle, but the way that trauma stacks itself happens in the subconscious, for sure, because there's no conscious association to an emotion. For example, if you discuss with the person, like I'm thinking of one particular case that just comes to mind now, who had a tremendous old fright. Currently, it was a fright of a stage fright, but they were already an actor, so it was a kind of a weird one to have. But years ago, they went to a dentist and they were actually terrified of the dental operation they had to go through. But they could remember the dentist, but there was no associated connection to the emotion of it. Right? It wasn't a thing. It's not that, because this is an adult, so it's not like lost. It was there. It's a valid memory, but no emotional connection to it. But when I did the body work, that allowed the release of the current absolute stage fright and panic, and they had gone to see just about everybody. What was interesting is the body released the taste of anesthesia, which was associated to the dental surgery, which then allowed this particular patient to connect to the absolute fright they experienced, release it, and then ended up releasing the stage fright, which had just like, two different elements, one big fear, one tiny fear. They merged, and then bang, it was all taken care of.
Okay, so that's beautiful, right? I mean, all of it.
Yeah, it was incredible to see.
Well, I would say simplistically, what's the common denominator there? Fear. And where is fear? It's in the body, and we're housing it someplace.
Exactly.
Right? Yep. And so sometimes the fear is stacked like that for whatever reason. We don't know why. It doesn't really matter. But sometimes it's stacked, and then both are released. Sometimes they're connected in a way we will never understand, and that's okay. But the fact is, both of them have to do with fear. So we're going into the body with that fear emotion.
Correct.
So, yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah. That's interesting. And it all comes back down to the body.
That's right.
Anyway, I'm looking at the time.
I forgot about the time. I'm sorry.
It was a great conversation. And maybe do you have a couple words you want to share? And then we'll put also your ways that people can get in touch with you and all that on the actual website or so. But any last words to close?
I think in terms of how I work with people, and the type of people that come to me are people that, want some kind of change, and maybe don't know, maybe they know the thought of it, maybe they know the emotion of it. And so we can get to the crux of it in order for them to work on it themselves. That's the beauty of what I do now, I think. And so in terms of, I'm in transition right now, so I don't have all my website things set up, but anybody can email me at, my name is spelled with one N, Donna, D-O-N-A, at transformingwithin.com, or my website, which is my name, DonnaJoyAirey.com. And so they can reach me either one of those ways, and I can talk to them, and we can have a conversation about what's going on and go from there.
Sure. And we'll be listing that
okay,
directly underneath so people can find it. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really look forward to having time with you, and I appreciate it.
Thank you as well.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.